Kia ora koutou, and welcome to this video about the Pluto generations. At the time of recording, Pluto is in the last few minutes in fact of Capricorn. It's about to move into Aquarius for the first time since the 1700s, so this is a pretty exciting historical moment. It's going to be going back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius over the next couple of years because it will retrograde and then go forward again and then retrograde, and it moves very, very slowly, just 1, 2 or 3 degrees per year. My name is Fiona Ingram of sunandmooncalendar.nz, and this is a video about Pluto and the Pluto generations as they apply to New Zealand or Aotearoa. We're going to go right back to the 1930s and look at the generational changes that have happened with Pluto going slowly through the signs. But first of all, I will introduce Pluto and what it means as a planet in astrology. So let's look at Pluto. It's a very cold, distant, dark rock, very, very far from the sun. It is still regarded as a planet in astrology, although it has been demoted in astronomy. And astrologers love the fact that there is a heart shape on the side of Pluto. There aren't any really, really great photos of it because, of course, it's pretty hard to get a photo of Pluto. But Pluto in astrology represents some very deep, deep parts of our soul. So a little bit about Pluto. Very slow moving. As I said, 248 years to get around the sun. And it has an oval orbit. It doesn't go round in a straight circle. It moves only 1 to 3 degrees a year, and during that time, of course, it'll be going forwards and then back with its retrograde. So it does retrograde regularly, just like the other planets. And because of that, it is moving into Aquarius until June. And then it moves back into Capricorn, and it's going to go back and forth, Aquarius, Capricorn, for a couple of years because of its retrograde regular pattern. Okay, roughly 20 years in each sign. Because of that, we have whole generations of people who are born under Pluto in a certain sign. Pluto is known as a planet of power, despite its small size and its distance. It can be about great power or great loss of power, great wealth or the great loss of wealth. It is about destruction. It can destroy, and from there, like the phoenix from the ashes, regeneration can occur. People with strong Pluto might have a kind of magnetism about them, some kind of powerful, almost sexual undercurrent. And Pluto is also to do with themes of sexuality and deep intimacy. And when it's used well, that can be absolutely very special. In the tarot card, Pluto is associated with the tower, and the tower being destroyed because it's about this destruction and regeneration, death, rebirth. And through that there can be elimination, purification. What is rotten can be exposed and cleaned out. In our personal lives, wherever we have Pluto, that is an area of life where we will have painful, transformative experiences, even if it's just something that from the outer circumstances it looks like it's not a big deal. Inside it, you might feel like you've been turned inside out. It's a deep crisis. In terms of the world, because Pluto is so long in a sign, it affects world politics, geopolitical stuff and themes, social movements. It brings power to themes and issues and topics, and then it can also destroy that power and expose dodgy stuff that's going on in those areas. So let's look at Pluto in Capricorn and Pluto in Aquarius. In Capricorn, since 2008, we've seen a focus on top-down hierarchical control in organizations, and that's been building. They've been acting out, they've been acting kind of authoritarian in many cases. And then in the last few degrees of Capricorn, 28, 29 degrees where we are now, we've seen some corruption exposed And we've seen some transformation, and that will continue as Pluto goes into Aquarius and things get sorted out from the Capricorn mess. When I say Capricorn mess, I say that because Pluto can bring out some of the negative qualities or the extreme qualities of a sign, and every sign has its higher and its lower expressions. From this year until 2044, that's over 20 years, we're going to experience Pluto in Aquarius, bringing out the power themes of Aquarius. This is likely to intensify the power of the people in terms of grassroots organizations with a flatter structure. Capricorn is the top-down structure. Aquarius is a flatter, devolved power across all the people. More power to community organizations, more power to grassroots organizations, more development of innovative, unconventional, unusual ideas and technology. That could lead us to some exciting places. It could lead us to some scary places. We shall see what happens. And towards the end of Pluto in Aquarius, once we get to the 2040s, we might be questioning then and exposing some of the excesses of some of the new technologies. I'm sure there'll be lots of AI and robotics and developments and communications and social media. And we also might question some of those grassroots organizations, because one of the weaknesses of that is the weakness of democracy, and that's where you get the tyranny of the majority, where the individual or the minority voice can be missed out. We shall see. Who knows if we'll still be talking about this in 20 years' time. But whatever happens on the world stage or the nationwide stage with Pluto moving into Aquarius, this is also happening on the personal level, and it could be a good idea to take note over the next couple of months with these first steps of Pluto in Aquarius. Do you feel any different? And perhaps this might be at a deep soul level, like I said, the reptilian brain. There might be some instinctual difference or a feeling of newness that's unfamiliar. There may not be a memory of it in your ancestral memory, or you may have a feeling of it not being in incarnations or previous lifetimes. Take note. Let's see what we can notice. Moving on now to the Pluto generations. The Pluto generations is about the groups of people that are born under Pluto in a certain sign. Because Pluto takes so long in each sign, there'll be a whole generation of people of a couple of decades that are born under the energy of that sign. Okay, so we're going to look at what those are. There are kind of two ways that Pluto affects us on a generational level when it moves through a sign. There will be the kinds of themes that come up with Pluto under the energy of a sign, whether it's Cancer or Leo or Virgo and so on, that we're going to look at. And Pluto will play out with some power issues going on with those that will come to the fore in terms of social movements and transformation that goes on at that time. And then secondly, all the people that are born under Pluto in that sign, they will then have an influence as they grow up. So some of the stuff that happens won't happen until those people are adults and perhaps becoming into leadership roles in organizations and positions and with the influence that they have in society. So it can be quite a long drawn out influence that Pluto has going into the future after it's moved on. We'll look first at Pluto in Cancer and Pluto in Leo. People with Pluto in Cancer will now be in their late 80s and 90s. And they influenced the world by changing the family. So as they grew up and had their families, they were amongst the first to have nuclear families with smaller numbers of children and living in more isolated households in suburbia, and without having the same multi-generational and many people in one household. The Pluto in Cancer generation was born between 1912 and 1939, and they went through the First World War, and then they were very young in the Second World War. They also went through the Depression and the influenza epidemic. So two characteristics of Cancer are quite a protective quality and the need for security and privacy. And another side of Cancer is about home and family and keeping the home fires burning, the close family, one's heritage. The World War influence on that meant that there was this sense for that generation of the need for security and protection. And on the family side, we also saw the development in New Zealand of the social welfare system, culminating in 1939 with the Cradle to the Grave Michael Joseph Savage, bringing in all of that. We also had state housing, and the home is to do with Cancer. So family life was transformed, and this was a generation that went on to make the nuclear family the main unit of how families were run and structured. We also saw urbanisation of especially Māori coming to the cities to find work, and that meant that a lot of people lost their connections to their home place, to their whenua, and that really changed things. So that transformation, not always in a good way, with Pluto. The Pluto and Leo generation were born between 1937 and 1938, and this was a period of stability and relative prosperity for people in this country and around the world. So this generation would have grown up with more feeling of trust that they would need in life, that they would have possessions, they'd have plenty to eat. And this allows for some of the characteristics of Leo, because Leo can be a sign that enjoys luxury and extravagance and just freedom of expression. And this was something that was able to happen because there weren't wars to fight and depressions in the same way to deal with. So freedom of expression. So we saw the development of the arts with that generation later when they grew up bringing in TV, and then that has allowed so much development in the performing arts space. The Pluto and Leo generation changed our attitudes to childhood. They helped to move things on from the seen and not heard attitude to children to allowing children to be sometimes at the forefront of social gatherings and to allow that play and respect that play. I also feel like there's been a theme with that generation of struggling to learn how to show off, like it's okay to show off, it's okay to express yourself freely, and that's a real Leo thing. I've seen that a bit with my parents. So remembering that with Pluto, there's added power and intensity to the themes of that sign, and then there's also the transformation and the change. The Pluto and Virgo generation has brought about changing attitudes to health. We've had the movements to eat healthily, to exercise, and we've also had questions and transformations about how we give service so that our work roles are changing. So with the focus on health, Virgo is about daily habits and clean living. So that generation has become practitioners and exponents of exercising daily. Back in the 80s, it came in with the aerobics and so on. And we think about our daily exercise. And in terms of our service, with technology, we have changed the way we give service. We are often working longer hours than the 40-hour week. And there's a lot more focus on detail and analysis with the way that modern technology brings us to our work. So how we give service is about Virgo. So Pluto in Virgo was 1956 to 1972. So that group are older parents, or they are leaders in society. They're at the tops of their careers, or they're coming out of their careers now. The Pluto and Libra generation made divorce normal. Divorce existed before, but it wasn't very common. And that generation had a lot of people brought up with split parents, and that became a normal thing. And Libra also, as well as relationship being about justice and equal rights, we saw a lot more focus on minority rights, Indigenous rights, and that's where we saw some focus coming in to the Treaty of Waitangi, and Dame Whina made her march and things like that happened in our country. The Pluto and Libra generation were born between 1971 and 1984, and part of that also was a Springbok tour bringing thoughts about racism and racist attitudes. And as that generation has grown up, they have brought things like bicultural practice and awareness of equal rights and concerns for equal pay and the living wage into practice a lot more in working life and our general life. Also, we have more freedom in relationships. Relationships are more fluid, and there are more ways to have relationships thanks to that group. And that group is still in their careers, so there'll be more changes to come in those Libra themes of relationships, justice and balance, and equal rights. The years of Pluto in Scorpio brought out Pluto even more, because Pluto is in its own sign in Scorpio, and that saw the excesses in wealth with the 80s and extreme wealth. And we also saw some transformations with sexuality where it became a lot more okay to be gay. And we also saw fears of that with the AIDS epidemic and the way people reacted to that. So that generation is still quite young, and they're still making their mark in the world as adults, but we are still seeing this transformation about gender choices, and that has to do with the Pluto and Scorpio generation coming to the fore. Scorpio can be a bit of an extreme sign, and that generation experienced Madonna and some of those excesses of artistic expression coming out. And a child of the 80s is Lady Gaga, and she's a little bit like Madonna. There's a bit of a dark theme and over the top. But that generation has also brought about awareness of trauma and the need to heal from trauma, deep trauma. And we also had a lot of revelations about the extent of child abuse, and there were some mistakes there, like the Christchurch crash situation where it turned out it wasn't the case that child abuse was occurring, but we did have a lot of cases where child abuse was exposed, and we started to realize how, unfortunately, very sadly, it is so prevalent in our country. So some of that is still coming out over time. And Pluto in Sagittarius has brought out a lot of questions about religion and religious institutions and some belief systems. All of that is still playing out because those are still very young people. But that generation in Sagittarius is already experiencing and transforming the way we do higher learning. So I'm talking tertiary education. We've got a lot more micro credits where you can just study what you need, the amount that you need, rather than committing to a whole degree. And of course, we have the rise of online learning. The jury's still out as to whether those changes what will stick, but I'm sure a lot of it will stick. What's good, what's bad. We will see. It's all unfolding before our eyes as this generation comes into adulthood. So Sagittarius is about organized belief systems, higher learning, and also it's a very optimistic sign, perhaps the most optimistic. And one of the things that came out around that time, 1995 to 2008, was the law of attraction. I don't know if any of you read The Secret, and we all got excited about what we could manifest in our lives. So that was around that time. And as Pluto can drive up fears about certain topics according to the sign that it's in, we've seen fears of religions in the ways that we got the reactions to the Twin Tower attacks, and then there was the war on terror. But we've also seen transformations of belief systems with people moving away from the conservative, traditional, organized religions to coming to ancient traditional systems with many people going back to indigenous roots and wanting to rediscover the wisdom of our indigenous ancestors. So now we are in the end of Pluto in Capricorn, and the people born under this influence are still children. We don't really know what it'll be like for them in the future and what they'll change in society, but it's more likely to have something to do with traditional top-down structures and government. So we've seen a lot of questioning and transformation of top-down structures. We've seen them getting quite intense especially in the last few years. So we'll see what unfolds as that generation matures. And as we go into Pluto in Aquarius, no one is yet born under that, but soon there will be some born, whoever's born between March the 24th and June of this year 2023. They'll be children of the generation of Pluto in Aquarius, and that might mean that they transform community organizations, humanitarian ideals, grand technological ideas and big visions. Very creative, the Aquarius sign. So let's see what happens. So there we go, everyone. That is a bit of an exploration of the Pluto generations across from Cancer, Pluto in Cancer, up to Pluto in Aquarius. It's very interesting, and it has relevance for our country here in New Zealand, Aotearoa, New Tirani, whatever you want to call us. So that's all from me for today. Hei konara, ka kite. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please like, comment or subscribe. It would be great to see some comments about how you feel Pluto has affected you in your life, or your experience of the Pluto generations in New Zealand or whatever country you're in, and perhaps how Pluto moving into Aquarius affects you. Go well, everybody, with this big new start of Pluto moving into Aquarius. Ka kite.